Okay, we're talking about what to do if you have a bad tenant. Now, most of the time, you have a bad tenant because they're not paying rent. There are other reasons why a tenant can be bad. So let's go through a few reasons why a tenant can be bad. A tenant can be bad because they're treating the property like crap, right? A tenant can be bad because they have friends that treat the property like crap. A tenant can be bad because they're not paying rent or they don't pay rent on time. A tenant can be bad because they're messing with your neighbors or your other tenants. There's a lot of different reasons. All right. Also, a tenant can be bad because they call you all the time to bother you about stupid things. All right. I once had a tenant yell that the toilet was too loud. I'm like, all the time? He goes, no, no. After you flush for 40 seconds while the tank fills up, it's very loud. I said, close the bathroom door. They go, I don't like to close the bathroom door. It scares me. So these are issues, right? I mean, I can tell you 100 bad tenant stories. Um, Sometimes a tenant's good and they can't get along with another tenant in the property or a neighbor. That happens all the time. So you have to know what to do with a bad tenant. So the good news is if you own the property in your own name, you can actually evict take the tenant to court pro se. That means without an attorney. Now, why is that good news? It's good news because it saves you time, and it actually, if you do things right, it'll save you. It'll certainly save you money, and it could save you time. So I used to represent myself with tenant issues for a long time, and I think I did a better job than most attorneys. If you need a referral for an attorney, I can tell you. But attorneys are going to charge you, and attorneys do not feel the same way. Don't feel the same urgency to get a tenant out as you do. So there are little shortcuts, and if you need any help in how to do this, I can help you with it. But the question is, what are you going to do with the property? So, are you going to evict the tenant and deal with this thing? Now, if you really don't know what you're doing, you probably should hire an attorney to do the process. If you don't want to take my advice and do it yourself, but you need to not cut any corners. So, we recently screwed something up, and we served a tenant in a way that wasn't perfect, and they challenged service. That 99 times out of 10, you have to serve. I mean, the basic process is you serve the tenant with notice to leave, and that they owe and or that they owe you money. Then they don't leave during that time, and then you get a court date, and then they show up in court. Now, the number one thing that they do is they challenge service. They say, I wasn't served correctly. If you're not served that notice, then when you go to court, the judge is going to go, you have to serve them correctly, and you just wasted a month and a half, 2 months, that kind of thing. So you got to serve them right. It's worth it to use a process server. They're not expensive at like $75. It's worth it to serve it with an official service because they can't really challenge that. If they do, they won't win in court. So I would recommend using a process company. I think I used Alert Process Serving in Nassau. They're pretty good. It was like $75. It's worth it to spend that on the service. That's the service of the initial. You have to serve them initial notice to leave, and you have to serve them with the court date during a very specific period of time. It can't be too early and it can't be too late. So you want to serve them. So you have to serve them specific papers also. All this is available online. It's not hard. So you want to serve them properly because if you don't serve them properly, they can challenge it. And then we lost 3 months on an eviction case recently because we screwed up with that. So you serve, then you get a court date. You show up in court. Now if they don't show up, that's great. You're going to get a default judgment, probably money, which you almost never collect. But you also get a warrant for possession, which means eviction. That's good. If they do show up, there's a whole process of how long it'll take and what goes on. So that's for maybe another video. But that's if you're going through the eviction process, right? Your other option is to sell the property with the tenant, right? And I've spoken about this before. We buy occupied properties all the time. People think we're nuts, but we know the eviction process and we can handle it. Very often when we go to see a property with a tenant, we'll give two prices. We'll give a price that we'll pay for it vacant, which is more, and then a price with the tenant, which is usually less. Even if the tenant's good, certainly if the tenant's bad, we'll go through that process. And when we buy a property, we always try and do it amicably. We offer the tenant money. We know how much evictions cost and how long they take, and we figure out a value for it when they can leave. Sometimes they accept it, sometimes they don't. It doesn't really matter to us. We've sort of built it into the price. So you have the option of selling it to an investor cash buyer, right? You can't, people are under the impression that if I have a good tenant, I can sell the property occupied to a retail buyer. It almost never happens. 1 in a million. And people are shocked. But my tenant's been here for 25 years. She's amazing. There's a lot of reasons why. Most likely your tenant's paying below market rent, and no one wants to deal with someone who's paying two, three, four. I've seen $1,000 below market rent. If I'm buying a property for a rental, I want to get max out of it, and rents have gone up a lot. And a lot of people who have tenants for a long time, I find, are undercharging them in a huge way. That's one issue. Another issue is you can tell me and even show me as much evidence as you have that the guy is a good tenant. I don't know if he's a good tenant. He could be a big pain in my ass. He might be a guy who calls me every week, tells me the toilet's too loud. He might be someone who seems good, but tomorrow, but doesn't like me and liked you. Also, I didn't screen him. I don't know if he's got income. I don't know what his financial situation is. Maybe he just retired and has no money to pay rent. Sorry. These are the kind of things, the reason why retail buyers won't. Also, many retail buyers don't want to rent. They want to live there. They want their cousin to live there. They don't want a rental, right? So for that reason, the concept, and we see this all the time, that, oh, I can sell this because I have a good tenant in there, it's great rental, is usually doesn't work for a retail buyer. It just doesn't work. Um, I know there's a concept of turnkey rentals. They're not popular in New York. They're popular in other places, but here those are also brand new, newly remodeled to the rental grade properties. Usually that's not the case here. So um, you need to really sell it to an investor cash buyer who's either going to rent it or he's going to fix it up and sell it, and he'll deal with a tenant for you. Right? That's a thing that we do all the time. But you need to know the options. So whether you plan to sell your house to us or not, if you have a situation with a bad tenant, you can call us and we can help you. We can tell you exactly how to deal with the tenant properly, things you shouldn't do. Right? I've spoken to landlords. They say, "Oh, I shut the electricity off." That's a bad move. If that guy goes through his legal, the guy hires an attorney, you're screwed. Right? If you make the place unlivable. So there are things you really can't do, and there are things you should do. And even if you don't sell the house to us, you don't list the house with us, you don't use us anything, we're a good resource for you to talk to you about how to deal with the tenants and what the house is really worth, what you can sell it for if you get this guy out of here, right? What we can pay you for it, and what we can pay you for may be a fraction of what you can get if you got the tenant out. So we might be able to help you and say, listen, get the tenant out, even if it takes 6 months, 9 months, whatever it takes, worth it, because if you sell it to somebody else, you're going to leave so much money on the table. It's worth it for you to go through the eviction, and we'll hold your hand or refer you to an attorney that can help you to do it. And I think we're honest, right? We're not trying to screw you. We're trying to help you solve your problems. So we're a good resource. Our number is below. Call us if you have any questions about dealing with a bad tenant.